It's time for us to talk about investigating tiny home companies and modular home companies online. This TikToker has been making videos about their specific tiny homes and taking people's deposits and some of them their life savings and never delivering the product that was promised to them. I tell you all the time in several videos, make sure you check to make sure that the company is legitimate, because in many cases you can get defrauded and lose thousands of dollars. And if you've noticed, I don't feature a lot of companies on my channel because I do a lot of legwork ahead of time to make sure it's a legitimate company to begin with. So today I'm going to show you exactly how I investigate these companies. We're going to be using this Holy Ground Tiny Homes as an example to see if there's any red flags. And at the end, you can tell me if you think that this company is a scam, or do you think the guy is going to be actually delivering on the tiny homes that he promised to these people. So the first thing I do immediately is check to see if they have a website. And most tiny home companies do. And this is where a lot of people get lured in, because they do see the tiny homes on their website and they think that this is their specific tiny homes themselves. When you go to their website, I want you to also see if they have a legitimate phone number on there and call the phone number. See if the phone number does exist. Also write down or copy in some location their email address, and then check to see if they have other social media sites. Now, if you are dealing with a tiny home company that doesn't have a social media site and they do have a lot of pictures of tiny homes, do a reverse image search of each one of those tiny homes that they have posted on their website. That way you can see if they have been stealing those images from other websites to promote theirs. This means it's a red flag. That is definitely a scam. Most tiny home companies and modular home companies that are legitimate will have a Facebook page, they'll have an Instagram page, they'll have a TikTok page, and sometimes they'll have a YouTube. Kind of rare, but sometimes they do. Now, this Holy Ground Tiny Home Company did have an Instagram and they did have a Facebook business page. They've since been removed since July because they were getting a lot of negative reviews since these lawsuits came about. But I went ahead and kind of dug into their website a little bit more. They have legitimate videos of legitimate houses. So for myself, if I had seen that, I would have thought that this was legitimate. Not only that, I ended up finding their TikTok page and they have all their homes on there. I did notice in their TikTok, because I have been observing it for quite some time, that anytime somebody puts anything negative on there, they tend to erase those comments. Anything that's negative on YouTube, they tend to erase those comments as well. That to me is your first red flag, because instead of addressing the negative comments, I always like a company that's willing to address somebody that has a legitimate complaint on social media. That way anybody else that's perusing the interwebs will see that the company did address those problems in public so everybody else could read about them. Nothing says a legitimate company like somebody that's willing to address a problem and address it in the public. The next step for me is to find out who the owners are. Who are the people that are running the deal? So the owner of this company's name is Matt Sowash. And I tried to see if there was any other companies that were talking about him, if there was any kind of like news articles about him prior to the investigation that's going on right now with him. I ended up finding lots of things, and not all of them were like glowing reviews. So Matt Sowash was a former head of an amateur poker tour, and he had been sentenced to 5 years in prison and 5 years of probation for illegal actions related to attempts to solicit investors into a poker tour that would have held the tournament bars. And so this article was written back in 2009. So for me, that would give me a little icky feeling about the owners of this tiny home company, but I'm not willing to just completely write them off. I would want to know who else is involved in this particular company itself. And also, when you look at their website, they do not have any stock photos or stock videos. They are legitimate photos, they are legitimate pictures, and it shows them as the owners standing through there and doing a whole walkthrough. Now, if you go to a tiny home company or modular home company and they all look like computer graphic type of pictures and videos, that's to me is a red flag. And I've seen companies do this. It's just all fake. They just buy stock images from companies and they put them on a website, but the homes don't exist. And it's just basically a way for them to either A, raise money and sell the company, or B, scam people out of large deposits. So don't ever send your money through a wire or Western Union or anything like that. Don't do that. That's a red flag. Use something more secure like PayPal, and don't give them a huge deposit. If they're asking for 50% or more on the price of the home in order for it to get built, that's a red flag. And before you put a deposit on any tiny home or any home for that matter, don't sign any contract until you understand it completely. If you're having trouble understanding the contract, go ahead and contact an attorney so they can explain it to you. Not too long ago, I had a tiny home company put in this workroom in my backyard. But I have to tell you, I blew them off several times because I didn't see a physical house. If they were planning on actually having me make a video about them, they were gonna have to show it to me. And they made the suggestion that they would come and bring this house to me to see it in my backyard. And of course, that was a giant green flag. Can't even tell you how many people have reached out to me asking me to promote their specific tiny homes, but they don't even have a product to sell. If you can't go to their actual factory to see their tiny homes, that's a giant red flag. Apparently with this company you can. On their website it shows you can actually schedule a tour to see their tiny homes. But I'm kind of wondering if this guy has gotten so in over his head, and I'm kind of convinced of it, that he's taken so many orders that he can't even fill. Just really want to say, if you've fallen victim to any kind of scam, whether it be for a tiny home or modular home company, don't feel like you're alone in this, and don't feel like you're stupid. Not even too long ago, like 2 years ago, a builder of tiny homes lured me out in the middle of Texas, and he didn't have any tiny homes at all. He said he had this off the grid tiny home neighborhood, and I don't know what he was expecting, because when we got there, there was nothing there. Very emotional. I was very disappointed. Now, I was able to find a customer of theirs that's on Facebook, and the reason I found them was because I typed at the top of the search bar of Facebook where I just said Holy Ground Tiny Homes, and this is a tip for you. This is what you should be doing too, and look to see what people were posting. Sure enough, her articles and everything she had to say about the company was in several open posts that I was able to review. I reached out to her, and she told me that her and her daughter have been waiting for a tiny home for quite some time. Her daughter actually even put down a 50% deposit. She said the whole time the communication has been lacking unless she constantly harasses them. Luckily, she said she's on the build list now, but her hopes and her daughter's hopes are fading in the fact that they'll ever see their tiny home. So now that we've combed Facebook, I think the next place we need to look is at their Google reviews. And if you look in the last several months, they don't have the most glowing Google reviews. One commenter even claimed that they were padding their reviews with fake reviews. I will tell you this, if you do get a negative review on Google, it's almost impossible to have it removed, whether they're fake or not. It's an extensive process. After talking to a few people and looking at a few things, I don't think their reviews are completely wrong. Not only that, there is a blog post that's out there that describes their whole entire process of trying to get their tiny home that they still don't have yet, and they still haven't gotten their deposit back. Let's look into that right now. As we share back to the start of the year, we put down a down payment for a 32-foot tiny home from Holy Ground Real Estate. We appreciated their 501c3 nonprofit status and their mission of helping the homeless. At the sign of our contract, we were hopefully for a start of June, and exuberant in assertions we would have no later than September 2022. In May, we hadn't heard anything, so we reached out. We were told August was when we'd be able to talk to an architect about the design. July came and things began to hit the fan, and a downward spiral started. We reached out to the company and were told, yes, we're on track for 2023. Since then, I have been ghosted. Red flag. Phone calls and emails are unreturned. The blog post goes on to say, I have no hopes that March of 2023 will bring us either a refund or a tiny home. And we received a state of the company email telling us to remain faithful and quiet. They said the bad press would cause them to go out of business and no one would see a penny. And then they said, is that a threat? It feels like a threat. That sounds like a threat to me. Is this a scam? Is this a Ponzi scheme? I don't know. And that's what happens with a good portion of people. So when it comes to building any kind of home, sometimes when some of these companies, they have a product, they have the team to build that product, and then they have explosive growth on social media sites like TikTok or Facebook or Instagram. And it wasn't something they were anticipating. They had normally, like, let's just say, built maybe 1 or 2, 3 houses a month. Now they're trying to build 1 or 2, 3 houses a week. And it's very difficult to keep up with it. And when all those orders roll in at once, the money's too hard for them to say, no, we don't have time to build it. Not only that, if they have gotten in over their heads enough, if they have outstanding bills with some of the suppliers will cut them off. But it's like a catch-22. They feel like they're so in over their head that they'll get the money some way, somehow. And sometimes they'll like refinance their house and sell their cars just so they can get some of the orders finished. And they feel like they're always playing this catch-up game, and they couldn't say no when they should have. But when you are looking at other companies, go look to see who is a member of the company, like who they have down as their sales team, who they have down as their marketing team, and click on their names and see if those people actually exist. Because I actually did go to a modular home site that had tons of modular homes on it, and I was like, this looks really shady. I called like 1 or 2 or 3 of those people, and sure enough, none of them worked for that specific company. But it's something that you need to be aware of, is even though you've investigated the owner, you've investigated the company. You've looked up the Better Business Bureau. Look to see if the people that are supposedly working for the company actually work for the company itself. Holy ground tiny homes have been all over the internet. All you have to do is do a quick Google search and find numerous articles about them. If you're having a problem with this specific company, contact the DA's office in Colorado about what's happening with your tiny home situation. They're taking the investigation seriously and they are looking into it. So what do you think? Would this be a company that you would still be interested in if you heard all of this and you saw all of this online? Or do you think it's a big fat scam? Do you think that these people will ever get their tiny homes? I want to know your opinion in the comment section below. To watch more videos about tiny homes and tiny home scams, you're going to watch these videos right here. My name is Kristina Smallhorn, your real estate whisperer, and I tell you all this because good real estate information matters. And please don't get scammed. I never want that to happen to you.